Okay, so today we are doing our final message in the book of Proverbs. So far, we have talked about the nature of wisdom, trusting in God, the fear of the Lord, and parents and children. Now, if we just stick to the book of Proverbs, I could probably do a sermon every single week for the next 2 or 3 years. So instead of doing that, this is going to be our last sermon, and this message is going to be on the topic of wealth and money. And part of this is because we find ourselves in the situation where the normal flow of money is being strangled out by this disease. And so it is important for us to remember that money is not just simply a physical thing, that there's spiritual reality to it. And if we remember the spiritual reality to it, we can have strength during these times of difficulty. Remember that these things are temporary. And I don't just simply mean that, this whole economic situation is temporary. I mean that this life is temporary, but that the promise we have of God is eternal, and that God himself is everlasting, and he's the same from day to day, whether we're dealing with this COVID-19 thing or whether or not we're completely comfortable and having none of these issues and none of these fears that we currently are wrestling with. So we need to remember that God is strong and that we can therefore be confident and we can therefore um, be assured that we can be grateful for what we currently have and know that he is with us and that he is gracious. And so the first thing that we need to remember when we're looking at wealth is that wealth and money and these kinds of things, it's a kind of power that exists in this world. The book of Proverbs in chapter 19, verse 4 says, wealth makes many friends, but the poor is separated from his neighbor. And this, of course, is talking about the fact that when you have money, you're able to influence people. And when you don't have money, you're not able to influence people. I can go in a bit more depth, but the point that I'm making right now with this proverb is that money acts sort of as a kind of social fuel. If you want to accomplish something in society, you use money to do it. It influences people. It causes people to react. And a lot of times it makes people claim to be your friend. But then people without the money, they don't have that power. They don't have that fuel. And they're more limited about the things that they can do. And the reason why people obsess over money is because they desire to have this kind of power. And this is the reason why money often can cause so many different problems. And then people can also abuse this power. And like any other kind of power, if we focus on it as simply a tool, we are more blessed than if we focus it on it as a kind of actual goal, as something that we center our lives around. See, with like something like a gun or a knife or something like that, if you respect it, it's safe. If you don't respect it, you can hurt yourself. And if you abuse it, you can hurt other people. Just like those kinds of tools, money is something that requires respect. You need to respect what it can do. If you respect it, then things will go well with you. If you don't respect it, you will hurt yourself. And if you abuse it, you can hurt others. Therefore, we need to have a proper understanding of what money is so that we can have a proper respect for it. We do not value it more than people, and we do not trust it more than God. Because money which is here today can be taken away without us ever knowing it, but God is the same yesterday, today, and today. But at the same time, we still need to recognize that it has real power. So, to simplify, Proverbs shows us two different aspects of wealth. And I'm going to be going over these two different aspects for the rest of this sermon. Because there are these two kinds of ways of looking at these proverbs. There's proverbs of warning and proverbs of blessing. Proverbs of warning in regards to wealth teach that it can be a dangerous tool if it's not treated properly, if it is treated poorly, and it can cause ruin or distress. but that it can also be a blessing. If we look at these proverbs of blessing, then it shows that money is something, wealth is something that God often gives us to do good in the world, to help people, and that it ought to be pursued with wisdom and with goodness. So I'm going to be looking at two proverbs from each kind, two proverbs of warning and two proverbs of blessing. So first of all, we have Proverbs 23:3. Do not crave someone's delicacies, for that food is a trick. Now, when I read this proverb, the first thing I think of is the book The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. For those who don't know, within that story, the main villain is the White Witch. And one of the main characters meets up with her at one point, and she offers him food, any kind of food that he wants. And he requests Turkish delights. And then when he is given the food, it has a spell on it that causes him to want more and more and more. And that this desire to have more and more of this Turkish delight, of this delicacy that the queen has offered him, causes him to betray his family, his friends, the whole world, in fact. And a lot of times we can see that the things that people who offer us, the people who look like they have everything together, who have the fancy cars, who eat the fancy food, who wear the fancy clothes and live in the fancy houses, that they try to influence us. They try to say, this is the way you should live, or that is the way that you should live. And we think that if we follow them, if we do what it is that they are saying that we ought to do, then we will get those same things, and we will be able to get those same houses, those same clothes, that same food, and have the same kind of comfort. But the problem is, of course, that the food is a trick. It's a lie. This is because all those fancy things that you see, that's not who the person really is. And that's not how the person is really living. There's more that goes beyond, that lies behind their lives than what we can actually see on a television set or something. So we have to be careful to not just simply follow after these things and not think, oh, if I had those fancy clothes, or if I had that fancy car, then my life would be better, that I would be more comfortable, that I would be safer, that I would have more security. But the truth of the matter is that that's not the way which the world works. And that the people who often are constantly showing those things, showing how fancy their clothes are or how fancy their car is, these are people who are in fact just simply trying to influence you. And you need to be wary of people like that. Wealth, after all, can't buy happiness. A classic American proverb. And we see this even stronger in our next proverb, which is from chapter 17, verse 1. It is better to have dry bread in peace than a house full of food in discord. Now, by dry bread, what it means specifically is stale bread, bread that's beginning to go stale. And it is supposed to be a sign of poverty. Now, a family in disarray basically causes more problems than a lack of food. I mean, we live in the 21st century America. Our poor are rich by historical standards. And yet people have managed to find happiness with far less than we have today, without television sets and video games and cars and more than one outfit. And yet they were still able to find happiness. They were still able to find joy in life. And this is because happiness generally doesn't come from those things. It doesn't come from money. It comes from other people that you know. If the people in your home are getting along, then there is peace. And even poverty is tolerable. Yet riches and comforts, they cannot overcome broken relationships, broken homes. We must always prioritize the people in our lives and seek to have peace with our brothers and our sisters. Jesus himself talks about this in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, if you have a problem with your brother, drop what you're doing and go and settle with things with him. Don't wait on it. If there is a problem, you solve it, and you solve it as quickly as you can, because you should pursue peace in your life and peace with other people. Putting money first always ends up breaking that which is actually most valuable. Therefore, we must always prioritize people first in all that we do. Now we come to Proverbs of blessing. So, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22. The blessing of the Lord, it brings wealth, and no sorrow is added with it. See, wealth that comes from God is actually a true blessing. We can talk ad nauseum about the kinds of pitfalls that money brings in our lives. Jesus himself talks about it often, how it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And it's very true. Comfort and riches have a tendency to corrupt. But when God sends us wealth, it is meant to be a blessing, and it is a true blessing when we recognize that it is from God. If you embrace it that way, then it is a blessing. See, if we think that all that we have we deserve, or if we think that we have what we have because we're special, then the blessing doesn't come. But when we know that it is from the Lord, when we know that it is from God, then it can actually operate as a blessing it is supposed to be. Then there will be no sorrow in it. See, when we think that our money comes from merit, we often start asking the question, well, why don't I have more? I should have earned more than this. I did better than that. Why don't I get more than what I got? Or if we think that the comfort that we have is some kind of a right, then we ask questions like, well, then why do I ever suffer loss? And whose fault is it that things in my life aren't going the way I want them to? But if all wealth is actually a gift, and a gift of love from God, then we can treasure it, no matter what it may be, and no matter how even little it might be. We may know that this is a gift from God, and that He gave it to us because He loves us. So like that money you got from grandma in your birthday card when you were a kid, we need to take it and say, I love the person who gave this to me. And that's what makes it good. That's what makes it great. Not how much money it is, but the fact that it's from Him. And I love Him. Then and only then is there actually no sorrow in the wealth. Now, another proverb, and this is going in a very different direction, is Proverbs 14:4. And this one I think is actually a lot of fun. It reads, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but the harvest comes from the ox's strength. Now, a portion of the Proverbs of blessing aren't about just how good of a blessing it is, but specifically how to achieve wealth, how to achieve money. And this is an example of one of those. One of the reasons why I just really enjoy this proverb is because of the image that it puts into your head. I mean, after all, why is it true that with no oxen, the manger is clean? Well, we're a farming community. I think you all know the reason why. But the thing is that, on the other hand, what good is an empty stable? What good is like, all right, fine, you're right. If you have no cows, then everything is clean. But if you have no cows, there's no milk and there's no beef and there's none of the things that's the reason why you actually have a farm. If you're going to achieve anything good in life, you have to be willing to deal with things that you don't like. Yes, ox are important, or a cow is important, but with it comes certain chores that we don't particularly like to do. But it's worth it. is worth it to get what it is that you're trying to get out of things. If you go through life thinking, all right, I'm just going to do what it is that I want to do to get the things that I want, it's not going to go well for you. If you want to achieve things, you have to be willing to do the nasty part of the job. You have to be willing to do the things that you actually don't like to do. And oftentimes get your hands dirty and even get a little smelly. But that's the nature of success. That's the nature of wealth. That's the nature of living in the world. You have to be willing to do those kinds of things. And that's also true if what you want to achieve in life is to bless other people. If you want to spread the gospel of Christ, that a lot of times that means getting your hands dirty. A lot of times that means you clean the oxen. It's not always, roses. It's not always uh, just using the strength of the ox. Sometimes it's about cleaning up after the ox when he's done. And this is, of course, part of the power of the genre of Proverbs, the fact that they can get these kinds of pictures in your head. And even sometimes you can apply the same proverb in multiple scenarios. Now, I don't think that you should try to go to the book of Proverbs and try to memorize every single one and use every single one. There's just too many of them to do that. But as you read the book of Proverbs, find the ones that really speak to you. The ones that are like, yes, that makes sense. Yes, that image is really interesting. Yes, that way of putting things makes this situation in my life clearer. And then take those proverbs and memorize those and hold them with you as you go through life. So, like right now, when we're worried about what it is that's going to happen next, take these proverbs of blessing and take these proverbs of warning and hold them in your heart and consider the lessons that money and finances, they're both a positive and a negative. That it does enable you to do things in the world, but it isn't as important as people or God. And if you prioritize the people around you, and if you trust in God alone, you'll find out that no matter what it is that comes, you will be blessed. You will have the blessings of God. Now, I was asked recently on the Bible study, what is the discipline of simplicity? And this is fundamentally the discipline of simplicity, of being comfortable, of being satisfied with what it is that you already have, and not thinking that you need to have more or go beyond what it is that God has given you. But then embrace whatever it is He does give you, whether He gives you more or not. We are Christians. We believe in God, and we know that He is sovereign and He is in control, and that we can trust Him. And I trust Him. And I pray that the Holy Spirit will come and that He will comfort you and show you the trust that we can have in God, even in hard times. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you. And may He give you blessing throughout all the days of your life. In Jesus' name, amen.